Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hello, my name is Patrick Devaney, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. Today we'll be talking about security versus usability, the challenges that we face in today's digital world of securing our computer systems and users' private information while still providing tools that are easy to access and use. For this discussion today, I have three wonderful guests joining us. First, Natasha Rachel. She is the Director of Information Technology at Atlanta Public Schools. Andrew Wallace is the Director of Technology from South Portland, Maine Schools. And last but not least, Jeff Janover, who is the Vice President of Interoperability and Security at ClassLink. I'm going to start by asking each of our guests to give a brief summary or a brief set of thoughts on the topic of the day, and then we'll move into a roundtable discussion on the topic. So first, I guess we'll go with you, Natasha, if you'd like to share some initial thoughts.
All right. So I am Dr. Natasha Rachel, the Director of Instructional Technology for Atlanta Public Schools, and I'm just excited to be here today and further the conversation on the importance of security and usability. I know that there is definitely a need for both to take place in order to make sure that instruction is happening in our schools, and I'm just excited to hear everybody's perspective and gain some more knowledge myself.
Great. Thank you. Andrew, I guess we'll go with you next.
Thank you. Andrew Wallace, Tech Director for South Portland, Maine Schools. And like Natasha, I'm here to learn and to share some of our experiences and really trying to find that balance between security and allowing for innovation in instruction. So hoping to come away with some ideas. Don't really feel like I'm an expert, but I feel like lots of us are in this boat right now trying to wade through these waters and figure this all out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Jeff, you have some initial
Patrick,
thoughts.
I am Jeff Janover. As Patrick said, I'm the VP of Security and Interoperability with ClassLink. Before working at ClassLink, I had spent about 25 years as the Director of Technology with a school district in New Jersey. So I've been involved in all sorts of security initiatives over the years. And there are, of course, there's a lot of give and take when it comes to ensuring that we have enhanced security in school environments, in every environment that we work in. And working now at ClassLink, trying to ensure, that all of our customers' personally identifiable information is secure and private and accessible is a big challenge. It's our main concern. And I come at it from the perspective not only of ensuring that customers' data is secure, but having been a customer in the past, I know how important that is. So I think this discussion is going to be very timely and very well received.
Welcome, all of you, and I do think this is going to be a real interesting discussion today. I think I probably would start by asking if you have some examples of where interoperability and usability clash, where the desired outcome kind of counters the benefits or the requirements on the other side of that equation.
We're all advocates for our students and teachers, but being kind of the person that gets the phone calls and the questions and the text messages and emails, simple things like when a teacher wants to show a certain YouTube video in their class and it's blocked, or a teacher wants to use a new app or a new website that they've learned about and it's blocked. Those are kind of the little nuances that we deal with. And it's always fun to have to go through the process of getting the information from the teacher. Why do you want to use this particular tool or YouTube video or that kind of thing? Kind of see where their mind is at around that process, making sure that it aligns with instruction, of course. And then working with Andrew, I apologize. I always call you guys my cable and wires friends, but working with our information technology department to make sure that we can indeed make these things work for our students and teachers, and then taking it also through that legal process that we know and love to make sure that the agreements and all of those type of things are intact with what needs to happen.
Interesting, Natasha, because I wonder sometimes about the process, you described asking them, why do you want to use this tool, or things of that nature. And we've been struggling, I think most districts struggle with coming up with a process by which, maybe they're the 17th person that wanted to use that particular app. And, what can we do to streamline that process so we're not having that conversation over and over again? And, this is like, to me, I'm looking for that sweet spot where a lot of the work is done for them, because often if it's too onerous, will they even ask us to use it? And then what have we done there? We've just sort of squashed their ability to grow and innovate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Of course, we're living in, the 21st century times. We're 22 years now into the 21st century and we're still saying it. But making sure that, to your point, that they're able to quickly grab what they need in a safe way so that they are able to, with those 4 C's, allow their students to communicate, collaborate, critical think, and be creative. I always leave one off, which in turn allows them to be innovative. So we definitely don't want to squash their innovation, and we don't want it to be a tedious process. But I think everybody understands in 2022, the era of Wi-Fi being here for all of our students since they were born, it still has to be safe. And so you're right. We do have to find that sweet spot that makes sure we're being accountable and that they still get what they need.
That's a really good point, Natasha. And I think you're talking about the educational aspect of the entire environment. There's also the nuts and bolts side that I'm always concerned about. And when we talk about usability, the ability to get done what you need to get done, what you want to get done on a regular basis, and how security, quote unquote, gets in the way of getting your daily work done. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is something like, multi-factor authentication or strong passwords, or, with something as simple as a strong password. That, I think we all agree that that's a great recommendation, strong passwords. The problem is that no one can remember them. They tend to write things down under their keyboards, which is a terrible idea. Or if a system administrator says, all right, we're going to change passwords every 3 months, or, and you can't use the last 200 passwords. That's a big challenge to a lot of people. For multi-factor authentication, you want to get online and get your work done, but before you can do that, you got to reach into your pocket and pull out a cell phone. Maybe you don't have a cell phone. Maybe you're in a block wall construction building, as most schools are, and you have terrible cell phone service, and you don't want to install, special programs. These are all challenges that need to be overcome. And that, I think, is probably one of the biggest challenges. That these things are the symptoms of what I see as the underlying issue. That underlying issue being culture, right? So we're all used to doing things a certain way, using a password like 123 or no password at all, or, just accessing whatever we need to access. And when someone comes to the realization that we need to secure things better, our culture has to change. And cultural change is probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever tried to do. You got to make your subjects think that it's their idea. Otherwise, it's not going to change. And getting those things in place and avoiding the issues of exactly what you're saying, Natasha, is, people trying to get their work done and trying to learn and, educate. That's where I think we're at odds.
Yeah. I feel like you were just preaching to the choir with 2 things you just said. Remembering passwords. I literally just switched from an Android to an iPhone. Don't talk about me. On Saturday, I announced I was talking to new teachers during new teacher orientation just on Monday, and got a standing ovation for switching from Android to iPhone. But having to re-download all of my apps and remember all the passwords, and where did I write that password? I didn't write it down. I know better. But where did I keep my passwords? So I've finally gotten that figured out. But it is a learning curve for a lot of people to have to switch back and forth to different things that they're not used to, right? And then the other thing you said was the sticky notes with the passwords on the computers. I can't tell you how many Twitter posts I saw during the pandemic of teachers trying to show their their screens with all their kids, and there was that sticky note with the login password right on the bottom of the keyboard. So we have to be better. We have to be intentional, and we have to make it easy. Like the teacher that wants to show that YouTube video like in the moment is not going to go through the process of getting it to Andrew and, hey, can you unblock this? Like they're in the moment, the momentum and the excitement for the kids is going, and they want it now. So yeah.
A lot of organizations are trying to roll out. They're trying to change culture. They're trying to move forward with more secure solutions. And the question that I have is it best to pull the Band-Aid off all at once, or is there any guidance about how to do those changes? Do you do them over time? How do you make it easier?
Pick a subset of people, maybe some of your more technical people that are flexible and won't freak out when something goes wrong. Because it is a major shift in how people operate, and you want to make it as bulletproof as possible before you bring it to the masses, so to speak. And going back to that cultural question, it's really funny. It's like I'm not at all perturbed that I have to put in my cell phone or a really complex password to get into my bank account. In fact, if I didn't have to do that, I'd be kind of skeptical about my security at my bank. And yet we act like this is so much harder. But a single teacher with access to student records through a student information system could cause way more havoc in identity theft or, the selling of information than would my rather humble bank account being wiped out because of a password problem. So I'm not really sure how we can make people understand that, if you really look at things like identity theft, the best people to steal identity is people who don't yet have credit established, people that wouldn't even know for many, many years that they have been compromised. 16-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids, that's a really prime target. And so I really think we need to find a way to get that message across to people that the data is as important, if not more important, than your own banking information.
That is such a great point. I think, whenever I deal with day-to-day issues, challenges, I always try to, come up with we use the 5 whys. Well, why is that? We try to come up with a root cause. And I think, having worked in education for a long time, it seems to me that exactly as you said, Andrew, that, a lot of people would never accept their bank not asking for multi-factor authentication or a strong password, but they are willing to do it in a school environment. I think a lot of folks don't see a school or an educational environment as the real world. It's like it's an insular environment, and the rules that apply to the rest of the world don't really apply here. We're protected. This is not that big a deal, and that's not true. You put it so succinctly that it's such a right target for the bad guys that we really do need to enhance our security and protect the kids. That's always the bottom line.
I think a lot of it too comes just with the education of what are we telling our teachers? Are we educating them on the why? So to your point, school is very insulated. And for teachers, a lot of them, they're coming to work, they're clocking in, they're doing their job, and they're going home. So we definitely have to educate everybody in a school system from the top down on why this is important. To your point, Andrew, I didn't even common sense, didn't even think about the fact that these are the most targeted because their credit is fresh and new and zero. And, it's a prime opportunity, and they don't realize it till they go to college or go to buy a house or a car. And by then, the damage is done. So, I think education to all stakeholders is critically important. I think if people know the why of why they have to do something, it makes it a little bit more digestible. And so, one of the things here in my school district that our our information technology team does is Cybersecurity Week. And so they kind of run it throughout the actual Cybersecurity Week, but they do send little email reminders and tidbits and quick little email blurbs about why we need to do something. We do have the multi-factor authentication, of course, but we're actually going to stronger passwords this year where they're phrases as opposed to having to change every 30 days. So I'm just waiting to see what happens with that because I hate changing a password every 30 days. But I know our teachers will appreciate that because it helps them as well. So it's getting ready to roll out. I'm curious to see how it will actually end up. But knowing the why alleviates, I think, the pressure.
That's a great point. I think I was going to mention, and I think you've sort of fed right into it. the culture needs to change, but awareness training is so important. And it's not just for the teachers and certainly for the students, but it's for students' families as well. Everyone needs to be aware of what needs to be done and why it's important. And, we at ClassLink have, security awareness training all the time. And it took a long time to get that cultural change in place where everyone, smiled. And we're still not at the point where everyone smiles and says, oh boy, it's time to do another security awareness training seminar. But I think, your question was, I think you had asked Patrick and Andrew answered that you kind of get a group of folks together that are early adopters and you get them to test things out and make sure that they work. But it's always an uphill battle, to change culture. But that awareness training is so important. And it's, I don't think it could be stressed enough.
And that group, like when you get that little pilot group, if you will, they become your cheerleaders and evangelists for their schools, their buildings, the rest of the district. So that is really important.
Yeah, I'd say also when you're creating those groups, initially you tend to go with the heavy tech users, but you really want to think, who's that man that emails me every weekend they forgot their password? Like, you want to get some of those real live people in there too, that are the ones who are going to make the mistakes. I just don't let them know you chose them for that reason, but you really want that mix, because otherwise you're just doing something to the techies that we're accustomed to, and it's not a big deal for us.
Guy that keeps making the mistake doesn't necessarily see the tech savvy folks as being the models that they want to emulate. You're right, exactly right. It's a good point.
I did want to ask Natasha, is your security week, do you actually include the students in that as well? So
we do. Yeah,
fantastic.
we do. So they get little tidbits as well to their emails about being safe and searching safe. And we bring in the digital citizenship component. And then in addition, we also have a cybersecurity poster contest where students from schools all across the district, K through 12, are able to create different posters. And then we have a big judging ceremony that happens at our central office. They're all displayed and the whole central office gets to come down and vote and judge. And so it's a pretty big event, and we get a lot of participation. It's really cute to see how like the kindergarten and first graders view cybersecurity and the importance of being safe versus the 12th graders and the images that come in. So yeah, we do everybody.
Very cool.
How'd you make that's amazing? It sounds like you made what probably on paper sounds like a horrifically boring event pretty fun.
Absolutely.
I like the idea of celebrating stuff too. Not like I've seen all sorts of different approaches. Like, oh, we're gonna do a spam test, and if everybody falls for it, we're gonna do some collective punishment. That's what everybody wants, right? 20 people fell for it. Let's take an hour at a staff meeting. And I've also seen places where they've spun that. And it's like, all right, at school, Lincoln Elementary School, they had the least amount of people that fell for it. Let's have a pizza party. Or that person over there, never fell for it. Draw a name out of a hat for the people who, did the right thing, and give them a better parking spot for a month or something like that. But I love bringing in the students. That's really cool that you guys did that.
And I loved what you were just saying. Like, I almost think it's kind of important to send out those little fake things and see what happens, who clicks on what. I have received, I think everybody probably numerous times a day receives like the fake emails. I get a lot of them from like Amazon, and PayPal is another good one I always get. So anyway, I received numerous ones of them, and I have used those as teaching experiences for my kids to say, okay, hey, and even my mom, who is almost 70, she'll be 70 next month. But I would just hate for them to click on something and be compromised. So I do personally use those as teaching experiences. And I think even adults, all of us need those teaching experiences. So sending those little, I don't want to say gotcha emails, but best practice emails, we'll call them, to teachers and people in the district to see what happens, because it may be that we do need to do some further training and have further conversations.
Yeah, we do that at ClassLink as well. We have a system that does our security awareness training and also enables us to do what are called phishing campaigns. So we put together, a period of time and a number of emails that get sent out over that period of time with various topics that may be timely. They all look very convincing. And I've gotten to the point now, after having used the system for a few years, that folks that what happens is if you see it and you fall for it, right? You click on a link, it immediately says, you shouldn't have clicked on this. Why don't you watch this video? So it immediately offers that training. But it's amazing. After a few years of having used this, I get emails from folks saying, like, "I caught you. I didn't fall for it. I take a look. It wasn't me. And they get so proud of themselves that they didn't fall for it, and that's a good thing. And these aren't kids; these are adults that get all excited about not having fallen for a spam email. That's a big deal.
Yeah, those they've gotten really crafty in the way. I mean, we know to look out for it, but they look very real. They really do. I love that y'all do the kind of remediation. So if you do click on it, here's, it's not you're in trouble or anything like that, but this is why you should not have clicked on it. And it's immediate. You don't have to wait for Cybersecurity Week to get, the training or the remediation. So I love that.
Any other methods that you're familiar with that you could share? We've talked about the phishing campaigns. We've talked about kind of getting some lead adopters. We've talked about making events out of it. Anybody have any other ideas on that front?
One other thing that we do, cybersecurity training is also built into our equity training, our ethics training, all these E-words, our ethics training. So beginning of the year, I expect in the next couple of weeks, we will receive a mass email throughout the district that says, hey, log in and do your mandatory ethics training. And there's a section in there on cybersecurity. And it has examples of, these phishing emails and those kind of things. And you actually have to go through and kind of click and see, and it really does a great job of explaining why you shouldn't click on certain things, or if you do open the email, what exactly are you looking for to know not to respond and send them your credit card number or something like that. So that's another angle that we come from. Are we perfect? No, nobody has it figured out 100%, but I feel like we have some good measures in place to hopefully alleviate those things.
And part of that training isn't just, don't click on links in emails and it's also looking over your shoulder, looking to see who's watching you log in or who's looking at content on your screen. Like if you've got student, PII, publicly identifiable information up on your screen, or personally identifiable information, and someone's looking over your shoulder, they're seeing stuff that they shouldn't see, and that's a problem. It goes beyond the use of computers. It goes to everyday things that we use that may not be technology oriented. So that's also important to keep in mind.
So we've talked about new apps and the teacher wanting to get at something in the moment. And work with new applications. I guess I'd like to ask, it is probably a changing line over time, but what are the non-negotiables? What are the absolute bare minimum security features that have to be satisfied?
Well, in Maine, our tech directors group runs a division. It's called the Student Data Privacy Consortium. So we head that operation up, and it's a national group that's growing constantly. And they have what we agreed upon as a data privacy agreement that we share with our vendor partners. And it's a pretty common right now. There's a national one coming out, but we still use a regional one right now. But there's some pretty basic stuff in there. And if you can't meet that level of student data privacy, then we're not going to work with you. We're not going to, sign anything. We're not going to give you any money. And, at first, there was a Northeast thing, not a lot of people in the Northeast, but when you see Texas and California get on board, well, then the people in sales start to pay attention, and I've pretty much lined up to sign this document. Now it's not perfect, and it's just an agreement, but it is a good first step for us. And if you don't sign that, it's pretty much non-negotiable.
Yeah, in the security world, the non-negotiable is referred to as the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. And I think those are the three things that always are at the forefront of the security effort. So confidentiality, meaning that, like PII is not exposed, information that shouldn't be seen by certain people don't fall into the wrong hands. Integrity means that data doesn't change when it shouldn't be changed. And accessibility means that it's available to you when you need it. It's not offline. So things like running backups, right, and making sure that you don't lose data. Those are the three things that come to my mind when you ask what are the non-negotiables.
Yeah, we're very similar to Andrew. We also, all agreements, of course, go through our legal department. So we always say nobody can sign anything unless you're the superintendent. So she gets everything, and depends on the legal department to make sure that it has gone through checks and balances. Of course, we don't want to compromise student data at any point in the process. And so if that document has not made it through legal and it's not signed by all parties involved, just like Andrew, it's a no-go.
Got your act together. This is good.
Well, it's interesting though, when you think about Atlanta, right, or any large metropolitan school with a legal team, not everybody's got a legal team, right, or even access to like legitimate counsel. But I think that all the more reason why when we start to agree upon things and find common forms and expectations, then we don't have to spend a lot of money because a law firm will happily do the exact same work for Atlanta, and then for me, and then for another, and then 50 districts down the line. So there's big power in numbers when you start coming up with common forms and common expectations.
I feel like that would alleviate a whole set of problems. If everybody had the same forms, that would be utopia.
It would. Although everybody's got different circumstances too, so there's probably another perspectives episode in there, big versus small or whatnot. Let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that have happened, and there may be more on the horizon. I've heard multi-factor authentication mentioned a couple of times, and multi-factor authentication is dependent typically on having another device that can be used or another method of verifying that's who you are. And so it's not applicable to everybody, or there's some situations where it doesn't work. Does anybody have ideas of changes that are coming that make that easier, or that have come already?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Patrick. And I think we've come across a couple of insurance underwriters that have insisted on every student in the school district, K through 12, have multi-factor authentication turned on before they'll insure. And when you think about using multi-factor authentication for a kindergartner or a first grader, it's mind-boggling. I mean, how do you expect that to happen? So although identifying an object on a screen is sort of a second factor, it's not really a second factor, because real multi-factor is, any two of the three, something something you have, and something you are, right? So something is like a username and password. Something you have is that cell phone maybe that has the authentication, device on it, and something you are maybe biometrics, and maybe a fingerprint or an iris scan. So really, a student identifying something like a ball or a flag as a second factor isn't true multi-factor. But we've successfully gotten these underwriters to realize that you can't expect, a very young child to work with true multi-factor authentication. So they're able to accept that, with young kids, yes, identify a ball or identify a flag or whatever, their choice is. But it's a real challenge. And I think, things like the original multi-factor was, sending an email or sending a text message to your phone. That's really not that secure when you think about it. There are lots of ways of thwarting those efforts and phishing those users. An authenticator app is a lot more secure way of getting that second factor in place, because it doesn't happen on multiple devices. It's only on the device that you have. But hardware devices like USB type keys that plug into a computer and enable you to identify yourself, that's a much more secure way of saying, I'm really me. Biometrics is getting better, but it's expensive. And I think, doing an iris scan is one of the best ways of doing it. But, false positive and false negatives, the equipment, unless it's really high-end equipment and very expensive, it's not all that good. So, there's a lot of give and take there.
I think you also got to consider that, it's in the same exact topic, which is, why would I trust you with my biometric information? I would argue that most parents would not trust us with their biometric information, and I wouldn't trust my own kid's school with that information. It's funny, like I'm looking right now at my computer, and I've got all these like adapters and things of that nature, so I could have spent $100,000 on widgets to plug into this computer, but guess what? Now I'm using USB-C, not USB 2 anymore. And then I got to buy a $30 device to plug in the device to go into the thing. It's tricky. I'm very reticent about physical objects that interact with a computer in the school setting because technology changes really rapidly, and you can't predict what the next port is going to be.
It's great that we're having this conversation because it is changing. The world's changing, security is changing, and I would hazard a guess that we'll have a new method to do this, one that's acceptable in places that today we don't have a solution.
Yeah, I would add one more thing too, because this often comes up in having our district just renegotiated a number of contracts with our different associations, right? And there's some people that they just don't want to use their personal cell phone in your space, because if you actually look at our acceptable use policies, we say things like, when you use your personal cell phone in our space, we can look at it. Mm-hmm. So there's a tension there. But, we've started to give cell phone allowances to people. And maybe it's just a small group of people. But if you incentivize people using personal cell phones, because everyone needs a cell phone now, it's just, you just do, right? You really will have a hard time surviving in this culture and society without a cell phone. And maybe if there's a way to incentivize the use of the cell phone, because I think that second device is the right way to do this. It's the most secure way to do this when you consider the other options. So how much would it cost to give all of your custodians a $10 a month, allowance for their cell phone for the incidental use to do two-factor?
Yeah, that's one option. The other option, and we've come across that, with school districts that run into that exact problem. The staff does not want to use their private devices because it opens it up to public access. I think a better solution there, although it's not necessarily inexpensive, is that USB device, the USB key that plugs into a device to identify yourself. It of course requires that you've got a place to plug it in, right? So if you're using a device that doesn't have a port, you may be stuck. But there are a few options. None of them are slam dunks. They're all, a little bit of, it's going to cost, and it's going to require training, and it's going to require that cultural shift, right? So there's no easy answer, I don't think.
Yeah, we fight that battle too with the teachers not wanting to use their cell phones because it does open up to public records. And we have teachers that are just adamant. They will not put their email on their phone, period. We have central office employees that feel the same way. So it is a catch-22. Like, you have to use it for multi-factor authentication. Does that open you up to public records? So yeah, it's a hard one.
That's probably a battle that's going to be fought in the courts at some point. I haven't heard of any cases where, there's been an Oprah request for a cell phone from a staff member that used it only for multi-factor authentication. But I'm curious to see if that eventually will happen.
Stay tuned. It's going to show up on some court docket. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think if I were to try to summarize some of the common agreement, is that the group that's actually most at risk with this discussion is the students, the young students. It's critically important that we implement secure solutions, and it's also critically important that we allow educators access to new and creative tools. So it's a constant work in progress. I think that I've heard that there are some solutions that have advanced a lot and provided great new options, but we still need more. There are spots where we still run into a wall and can't get through it directly. The focus on this security issue has elevated, certainly with our guests here today, to the point where there is a minimum requirement. If you don't satisfy that, you won't have the chance to do business with your organization. And they also build in some of the aspects that are, kind of the non-negotiable aspects. And I think the third point that came up was, or the final point that came up was about this being a culture shift. And there was some great ideas about being creative in ways to make this culture shift more enjoyable, more attainable. and more positive instead of being perceived as a negative or a burden. As Andrew very eloquently pointed out, it's not a burden when it's your bank account and you're having to protect it. So we should be guarding other PII just as narrowly. Certainly would like to thank all of you for this rich and enjoyable conversation. ClassLink is proud to sponsor this podcast as a meeting place to facilitate these conversations. We thank you for joining us. And if you have any interest in seeing other episodes, you can find them at your favorite podcast store or the Media Hub at classlink.com. And finally, if you have any thoughts for topics, suggestions for topics for us to talk about, they can be sent to perspectives@classlink.com. With that, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.